Now, and tell them Radical Russ sent you. The cannabis community is a diverse set of people from all walks of life, conservative and liberal, black and white, straight and gay, rich and poor, and everyone in between. Learn more about the people we are freeing from adult marijuana prohibition in our Cannabis Community Chat.
Welcome back, everybody. 31 after the hour, and today in the Cannabis Community Chat, we're going to be talking about the threat of Child Protective Services against people who are law-abiding marijuana consumers. An expert on the subject and a victim of these problems herself. We've got Serra Frank on the line, the founding director of Moms for Marijuana. Serra, how are you today?
I'm good, Russ. How are you? Thank you.
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to have you on. And I just wanted to let our audience know that we had originally planned this segment to be a little bit of a panel segment. We were going to have another couple of guests on the show. But apparently, a judge doesn't think much of the First Amendment. Can you give us a clue on what's going on here?
Yeah. The original plan that you and I had discussed was to have the Shoares family on. Now, that's Jess and Tabitha Shoares down in Phoenix, Arizona. And I've been working with them closely. They reached out to us through Google, through the Fight for Lily Foundation, because they wanted help. They felt that they were being unjustly persecuted, and that the state had been taking advantage of a tragic situation where they had lost one of their children in an accident and withholding their other children for that. So we got involved and we went down to Arizona and did what we do, which is chalk walks and raise awareness and, start talking about this. And suddenly there's a gag order on the parents. And they have been threatened with jail time. And this is all that I can really remember from when I was in Arizona a few weeks ago.
Wow.
They were going to be on the show today, but they had court this morning. And I received a phone call after court that she can no longer talk about things at all.
Wow. Okay.
And I don't even know what happened in court other than they told this family to tell me to take down my Change.org petition against them. They're saying that it's interrupting their work.
It's always suspect to me whenever a government, any sort of organization tries to cloak themselves in secrecy. Is this something that's happened in other of these CPS cases where a judge will forbid people to talk about it?
Well, in our case with Billy and the Fight for Lily, for sure out of Spokane, Washington, the Commissioner Joliker in that case, told Billy that it was going to be detrimental to his daughter and that they were going to place her for adoption if he continued to speak out about it. And she was upset because he'd gone to HempFest and talked about it because his was a marijuana-related CPS case. And he just got louder. So no actual gag order has ever been issued. And I hadn't really heard about that happening until I started hearing these stories from Arizona. It seems to be a very common thing in Arizona, and it's the question that when they start being all secretive and putting gag orders on people, what is the court hiding? And like in Washington, when Vika and Jesse Thompson were fighting a case about marijuana out of Bellingham, Washington, 2020 came in with cameras, and the judge welcomed them into the courtroom, and he was a very logical judge. So it makes you wonder about the judicial conduct in those courts in Arizona when a gag order is issued.
Okay, so let's find out what we can about the Shoares case. What can you tell us? How did it come about?
Well, I can tell you everything that I knew up until the gag order because I've been working with them for many months now. And it started with their daughter, and she was 3 years old. Her name was Chloe. And she passed away while in the care of a babysitter. The parents.
Is there a cause known for why the baby passed away? A disease, an accident, something like that?
They didn't give one, and the police have yet to give one. They are alleging that it was homicide by the babysitter, but the babysitter has not been arrested. No charges have been filed, and this was in August of 2014.
Okay.
So that kind of brings, and that's the entire basis, or the primary basis, of what I remember when I first learned the Shoares case for CPS involvement. But as with any case with CPS, what they do is they pick the parents apart and they put them under a microscope and they find other reasons. And they put them in services and assessments to find other reasons of why they should keep the children away. And that's what caught my attention really big, of course, because I'm a marijuana activist, was that they kept throwing marijuana into it, even though in Arizona it's been medically legal since 2010. And what they had been throwing into it was that the father had smoked a bowl while he was in Colorado and then moved to Arizona. And so he was positive. And so these are all things that have all been known since last year. This gag order that they've put on, is obviously unconstitutional and obviously hiding something, but apparently very common in Arizona. And marijuana, it's just used as a piece of the puzzle. So with CPS and the problems with CPS corruption is that it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry that is using our children as currency for federal funding. They get grants off of Title IV, off of Social Security, the reduced school lunches programs, Medicaid, and so a lot of the reasons that they remove children have to do with medical choices, religious beliefs, getting a second opinion, having a 10-year-old walk to the park by himself. I mean, I did that when I was 10. When did that become child abuse?
Yeah, we can think of Diane Fornbacher's case where her son mentions that mom talked about industrial hemp, and that was enough to trigger an investigation.
Right. And they look for any reason. And it's when you start looking into the training and into the statistics of these agencies, you see kind of why there is this corruption. It is a lack of training. A lot of people are starting to speak out. There's a former CPS investigator from Texas named Carlos Morales who wrote a book called Legally Kidnapped, and it goes into everything about what CPS uses and how little training they actually have and actually give to these people who then have authority to remove children from families. And we find that these social workers are guilty of fraud. They're guilty of perjury. They fabricate stuff just to pursue parental rights. And that was another thing in the Shoares case that was being done, is they were already pursuing their parental rights and they hadn't even obtained an actual not contested dependency on the children. So looking at CPS and looking at the marijuana issue, we've got 37% of foster kids are there because of something to do with the war on drugs, some kind of drug use where the parents are needing rehabilitation.
Wow. More than one out of 3.
A lot of those, yeah.
Wow.
And, well, when you put it into comparison, only 22% of children in foster care are there for actual abuse.
Wow.
And so they are using marijuana and they are using the war on drugs to attack families and to tear families apart. And it's all based on what's in Latin, it's called parens patriae. I'm bad at Latin, but it means parent of the nation. And it was used in England prior to colonial times to take guardianship of orphans and children who needed, a parent, somebody to take care of them until they reached the age of majority. And I'm actually right now in the middle of a juvenile justice course for my criminal justice degree, and it keeps talking about this parens patriae, and it's for the state to act in the best interest of the child. And that's used so much in dependency, and that's used so much to remove children is, it's in the best interest of the child. That's first. That's what's first, and we're not going to even question it until we've sorted it out. So they'll remove children from their homes and throw them into strange homes where they're more likely to be abused, more likely to be killed, and more likely to suffer PTSD compared to even combat military veterans coming home from war. And when you talk about the best interest of the child, is it in reality doing that to them over an allegation?
Yeah.
Because it's not even substantiated allegations that can remove these children from their homes. It's just anybody can make an allegation.
Exactly.
And that's where the marijuana thing comes into play.
It reminds me a little bit of asset forfeiture, where your stuff doesn't have to be guilty for them to take it. Here, you don't have to be guilty for them to take your kids. At least what I'm understanding from your description of the Shoares case, we have one of their children dying in the custody of a babysitter, not the parents, and then the parents have other kids that the court doesn't show that there's any damage to these other kids, but because daddy smoked a joint in Colorado, they got to be taken away. Am I summarizing this right?
That's a piece of it. I mean, they've attacked pretty much every aspect of the family that they can. But the main one, and what they were attempting to sever their parental rights on, was the allegation that they left their child in the care of this man who abused the child, and they should have known not to use that babysitter because it would put the child at risk. They should have known this, and that's the basis for like the entire thing. And then they go in and they pick it apart. You know, just like in Billy's case, marijuana had nothing to do with it. It wasn't until he was in the courtroom fighting back that they brought out the marijuana and said, oh, you're a medical patient, you can't parent your child. Well, he fought back and he proved them wrong, and that's what the Shoares family wants to do. But, of course, you know, there's this gag order, so how can they adequately fight back and voice their frustrations and their grievances with the government if they're not allowed to have their First Amendment right to do so?
Yeah, and folks, the constitutionality of this, I mean, people think, wow, that's got to be unconstitutional, but you'd be surprised what powers a judge has. I remember reporting on the case of South Dakota normal activist Bob Newland, who, after he got busted, a judge forbid him for a year to do any organizing or lobbying for medical marijuana in the state. He couldn't talk about it anywhere. So it's amazing what they'll do. And this is really tragic. In the time we've got left, Sarah, give folks some concrete things they can do, some help, some websites, donations, anything they can do to help this family.
For sure. It's the Facebook page that I've created to help just gather support for them is facebook.com/Shoares family, SHOARS family. You can also find us through the Fight for Lily. We are going to be organizing some protests just in general of all gag orders and corruption and using children as tools of intimidation to get parents to shut up and comply with the services that they're saying they need without any evidence. So we need people to start standing up and speaking out and learning their rights, because you have rights that will protect you against them seizing your children for marijuana use and for any reason. So it's important to learn how to fight.
Yeah, it's very scary, folks. Even if you're in a medical state and you got a card, even if you're in a legal state and you're an adult, we're still not equal. They can take your kids. Serra Frank, Moms for Marijuana, the Fight for Lily, thank you so much for delving into this area of reform. It's very, very important. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Russ.
All right. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this subject and how, if it wasn't marijuana, their bigotry would be obvious. Stick around. We're back right after the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.